Hey everybody, it's Christopher. Okay, so everybody's always asking me for recipes when I post things that I make. I don't follow recipes, I just add things when I cook. So right now I'm going to show you how I make my cauliflower soup. So right now in here, I started this and realized, I should do a video. So forgive me, I started, but I'll show you what I added. So first of all, I add chicken broth. This whole big box of chicken broth to my pan. And then I added curry powder, okay? And after the curry powder, I added turmeric. Now, you're gonna ask me how much did I use? I just pour it in until I see it's enough. That's how I cook. Okay, now I'm gonna add black pepper, but before I add black pepper, I want you to know that I also added a bay leaf. Okay, so you're gonna see how I cook. This is what I do. Okay? I just watch, I'm a visual learner, I'm a visual eater, I'm a visual taster. Here's some cayenne pepper. Now we know cayenne pepper is really hot, so you just put a little bit in like this. I like a little spice, you see that? And then some seasoned salt. You add more salt later to your own tasting. And then I also like to add a little crushed red pepper. You can always go back and add more. Okay, and then earlier I added ginger. And then I'm going to add some minced onion, because minced onion is really strong in flavor. It's actually more intense than fresh onion. So I add that, and you can just smell it. This smells like the onions they use on the hamburgers at McDonald's, the regular hamburgers, not the quarter pounder. I used to work at McDonald's when I was in high school, and this onion used to come hydrated, and it had the same smell. Every time I use this, I smell it. I get this at Ollie's in this big thing for $3.79. You see? All right. So after that, then I like to add a little parsley flakes. Okay. Add some parsley flakes. And then, for me, this is an option. You use anything you want when you're making these soups. I like to add a little of this shazam with saffron. This is a Spanish type soup or seasoning. So you see, I cross over ethnic groups, right? When I cook, I cross over ethnic groups. All right, now we're going to let that come up to a boil, and then I'll show you what we do from there. All right, before it starts boiling, get this going, fix this camera here. There we go. Before it actually starts boiling, I want to add a half a stick of butter. Okay, and then I want to add some half and half cream. Half and half. Just a little bit to start with. Because if you add too much when it starts boiling, it's really going to get all bubbly. So I just add a little bit, and I'll add more later. And let's just stir all this around. Adding that butter really gives it a nice sheen and also a nice flavor. Oh my gosh, I could smell this already. This smells great. Now you can also make this from real scratch if you want to do your own bone broth from chicken, if you're making chicken soup. Now, I talked about this with many of my friends in the past, and if you really want to make an authentic broth, the best broth is from an old hen. Now, my grandmother taught me this when I was younger, and it's really hard to find an old hen anymore. What is an old hen? Well, back then, the old hens, they didn't give them any hormones, they didn't feed them anything. They allowed these hens to age naturally. And when they stopped laying eggs, they weren't making money for the farmer anymore. So the farmer butchered them and sold it as soup meat or as stewing chicken or a roaster. Now, here's the deal. An old hen's meat is so tough, very tough, and you have to simmer it in the soup all day. If you try to cook it too fast and you bring it to a boil, the soup will get milky. It won't get that yellow, beautiful broth, believe it or not. It just loses its consistency, I guess you could say. But I remember going to my grandmother's house all my life growing up, and if she was making chicken soup that day, especially in the summertime, you could smell that chicken soup blocks away. I'm telling you, that's how intense the flavor was. You did not need any bouillon cubes. All she ever made the soup with was carrots, onions, a bay leaf, a peppercorn, and that's how she made the soup. And she didn't cut the meat up afterwards. She just served the broth with the carrot and onion over a bowl of homemade kluski noodles. She used to make her own homemade Polish kluski noodles. And then she would serve the meat all cut up, which she would do before she put it in. She'd cut the meat up into 8 pieces of the head, and she would cook that in the soup like that. And she'd clean the heck out of it before she put it in there. I remember her under that sink, always cleaning it until it was like nothing. If you rinse it, nothing would come out. And while that soup was cooking, all that, I guess this protein broth would come to the top. It was a foam. So she would constantly skim that for half the time it was cooking to make sure that broth was pure. So anyway, after she poured the soup over a bowl of noodles, after you're done eating the soup, then the second part of the meal was actually a piece of chicken. And let me tell you something, that chicken did not fall off the bone. It was as firm as a piece of steak. And the reason why, again, you used this old hen back then was for that intense flavor. And if you grew up like I did, and you remember your grandmother or your great-grandmother making soup from an old hen, you will never forget that smell. Never. When we're kids growing up, there are certain smells that are embedded in our head. When we're younger, when we fall in love, there are certain smells that are embedded in our head. And you never forget that. Well, I still have never smelled soup like that. I cannot find an old hen like we used to have growing up. But if you're a farmer and you feed your chickens or whatever, hormone-free food, and you let your hens get old enough, till they retire, and then you slaughter them and you make soup, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so you can see this is starting to steam up. It's starting to cook. And then what we do, I should turn this fire up while I'm talking, you guys, to get this going faster. So you can see what's happening here. It's starting to, you can start seeing the steam from it. Now what I'm going to add, a bag of cauliflower, or you can use fresh cauliflower. And I'm also going to add a bag of broccoli. Broccoli is really good for you. And if you're on a low-carb diet, you need this broccoli every day because of the nutrition in it. It has so much potassium in it. And if I remember correctly, it might have some magnesium in it too. But I'll tell you what, I will tell you, whoa, look what I just did. Stupid me, talking and not paying attention. Let me rinse this and I'll be back. Okay, it wouldn't be a video without me flubbing up. Alright, if you're like me, when you get older, you find that your muscles tend to get sore. You get a lot of cramps. And that's because you lack potassium and magnesium. So I get my potassium, magnesium from vegetables now, a lot of greens. If you eat more greens to your diet every day, you'll find that your muscle cramps diminish. I can't drink regular coffee. I have to drink decaf because the caffeine causes me to get muscle cramps. So if you're like me and you find yourself getting muscle cramps or charley horses a lot, it's because you're lacking those nutrients and minerals, and you need to cut back on the caffeine as well. Even chocolate, eating chocolate has caffeine in it. You got to be careful. So once again, I do cauliflower and I do broccoli. Now, if you're not worried about a low-carb soup, you can also add some fresh corn to this. And then after all this boils and comes to a boil, once I put the broccoli and cauliflower in and it comes back to a boil, then I shut the heat off, and then I will take my hand mixer and I'll pulverize it all. So I'll come back and show you the next step after this gets boiling. Alright, so now it's boiling. We want to go in here and remove this bay leaf. I'm going to remove that bay leaf. And then I'm going to add the first bag of vegetables, now the cauliflower. Now I'm going to add the broccoli. And I'll bring that up to a boil. Oh my god, I wish we had smell-o-vision because this smells so good. Look at that beautiful broth. And this is all going to get pulverized with the hand mixer once it cooks down here. I'll also be adding some more cream. And then what I do is I shut the heat off after it boils. Turn the heat off, pulverize it. Then I blend in some Colby Jack or 3 cheese Fiesta cheese into it. This is starting to come to a boil. It's on the edge of starting to boil. Now another thing I want to tell you is that you can use, if you want to add maybe some sausage or some chicken or whatever you want in here. You know, if you're a vegetarian, you're not going to add anything else except what I just showed you. But me, I like to either use some crumbled bacon, or if I have some Italian sausage or any type of meat. But right now, the only 2 fats that are in here is butter and the cream. So on a carb diet, on your keto diet, all of this is acceptable food. With the exception of the dry onions I put in, because some diets you can't have root vegetables, and onions is considered a root vegetable, but I find that little tiny bit really doesn't make a difference. It's basically in there for flavor, but if you're really, really adamant about it, then you'll want to avoid the onion. All right, I thought this was on the edge of boiling up. It's almost there. Yeah, there it starts. I can see it moving. I can hear it. All right, here we go. It's starting to bubble. I'm gonna add a little more cream. Now, if your cream and butter were not room temperature, it knocks down of course, the temperature in the pot, so you have to bring it back up to a boil again. Look how delicious this is. Look at that broth. Mmm. Alright, now I'm going to shut it off. I've got my, what do they call this? This is called a, well, this is the brand, he deserves the brand. Hand blender. It's called a hand blender. So what you're going to do is you're going to lay it inside. Be careful, because if this splashes on you, it's going to burn you. So just be careful when you do this. You don't want to wait till it's too cool, because you want to add the cheese after this, and you want the cheese to melt. So just take your time doing this. And I'll be back after I do all this. Okay, here's the soup after it's been blended. There might be a chunk or two still in there. Tiny little pieces in there. That's not going to matter for me. But there it is there. Now the fire is off. Or the electricity is off. See, there's still a chunk there, but that's okay. But look at this. Look how beautiful. Now we're going to take the cheese. And you don't want the fire going when you add this cheese. So you just add a little bit at a time. Just stir it in. And this will help thicken it up even more. Also, if this is not thick enough for you, you can add another bag of cauliflower when you're cooking this. And that'll make it even thicker. If you are not on a low carb diet, you could have added potatoes to this, or squash. You can add squash, and that's good. Squash is good for a low-carb diet. There's many different things you can add to this soup, but this is like a basic right here. And all that cheese in here will melt. Look how delicious that is. Like I said, I wish I had smell-o-vision because this smells so delicious. Now, if you didn't want to use cream, half and half, you can use coconut milk if you wanted. Look at that. I'm going to add a little more cheese. And see, I don't measure. I do everything by feel. And I can feel as my spoon is going through this now that it's thick enough for me. See how that thickened up with that cheese? And if you want a little thicker, you can still add more cheese. So delicious. Now, like I said, you can top this off in a bowl with crumbled bacon. You can add some meat to this if you want. I'll have to look in my refrigerator and see what I have left over. Maybe have a little leftover steak I might put in here. If I have any leftover chicken, I might cut up in here. It's up to you, whatever you want. But this, my friends, is our cauliflower and broccoli soup. And for those that are always asking for a recipe from me, you basically saw how I did this. I just shake things in there until I think it's good enough. And then, something they always tell you on MasterChef when the chefs are cooking and the judges are always like, did you taste it before you served it to me? Some of them say no. Like, well, you know, every good chef is going to taste their food to make sure it's good before they serve it. You may need to add more salt. You may want to add more spice. You never know. So always taste your food before you serve it, especially if you're in a competition. That's like people who drag queens who go on RuPaul's Drag Race and they don't know how to sew, and all these years they watch RuPaul's Drag Race and they know that half the time they have to use a sewing machine to make their own outfits for challenges. Or Project Runway, when you watch Project Runway, there were some designers on there that never used an industrial sewing machine, but they went on the show. Like, how could you watch the show all these years and see them using industrial machines and you're going to go on the show and don't know how to use one? So, there you go, my friends. Delicious. I hope this inspired you and you try this soup and see how it turns out for you. I know it'll turn out great. Always go by feel, smell, and taste. Talk to you later. Bye.